Here at the 41 acres along the Mohawk River in the town of Clifton Park. It's the unnamed property. We're here to look for some more ephemeral spring wildflowers and other spring season wildflowers. Here we have a nice pair of trout lily, one of our most common of all the ephemeral spring wildflowers. This plant is showing some its flower clusters at the top. This is not an ephemeral spring wildflower, but it is one of our spring wildflowers. This is golden Alexander's, and it will have a cluster of yellow flowers probably another couple weeks. Here we have a nice cluster of long-spurred violets, one of our earliest ones. Long-spurred violet, now in bloom. Here we have a little cluster of Carolina Spring Beauty, again another one of our ephemeral spring wildflowers. You can see the lovely pink stripes on the petals. Carolina Spring Beauty. Another one of our spring season wildflowers is small flowered crowfoot. You can see the very small, in the buttercup family, you can see the very small yellow flower at the top. Part of its name, of course, comes from that. But what's interesting about this plant, you see the rounded basal leaf. Then we come up a little bit higher on the plant, and you can see the lobed leaves here, about midway in the plant. And then at the very top, we have some very narrow, elongated leaves, very lance-like. And that's a distinctive feature of this plant, with those three types of leaves all in the same plant. This again is small flowered crowfoot. Hopefully you can see kind of in the center of the frame, that is a great blue heron at the far end of the pond. It's out taking strolls to the shallow water looking for fish or frogs. A couple of times you can hear the belted kingfisher calling overhead, flying the length of the pond as well, but haven't been able to catch him in flying. But that's a great blue heron. Flying overhead here is a turkey vulture. It's making some loops. I don't think I'll get a good enough picture for you. Just silently looking for prey, or more likely a dead carcass. Getting a little bit better glimpse of our great blue heron. He hasn't moved. Probably reluctant to leave. I think he's in a good fishing spot. As you can see here, we have a nice cluster of mayapple coming up. It'll probably look like a little miniature forest in a few more weeks. As you look more closely at these plants, the larger specimen back here, you can see only one leaf that's going to be on it. That's the first year's growth. And then you'll see others with this flower bud on it, and that also shows that it has two leaves that are coming. As you look around, there's several that have a flower bud, and that will have also the second leaf to it. It's a 2-year or biennial plant. It flowers in the second year. Mayapple. And come mid-August, it'll have a large fruit, probably about the size of a cherry tomato, but its color will be a translucent yellow. It's a delicious, very aromatic fruit, and that comes on mayapple. Now we've come upon cut-leafed toothwort. You can see it's got a 4-part white flower. This is really one of our earliest of all the ephemeral spring wildflowers. These are probably just getting a little bit past peak bloom right now. There are many throughout this property. This is cut-leafed toothwort. There goes our friend, the great blue heron. Gonna seek some solace down at the other end of the pond. Now we have a pair of mallards. To give you an idea just how well established the population of Carolina Spring Beauty are here, I want to give you an idea. I've shown you a close-up of these plants, but now take a look and you can see all of the little wonderful blooms, 5 petals with the pink stripes. Just give you an idea just how well established they are here at this property. Really, this is one of the heaviest areas that are filled in with blooms. As I scroll back here, or show back, I'll get an idea. Most of the light colored things you see are the leaves and the blooms. And Carolina Spring Beauty. Here we have a cluster of leaves emerging. This is of Canada Mayflower. It's also called False Lily of the Valley. It's a very fragrant, tiny little white flower. These are leaves that are just emerging now. This will be blooming probably about mid-May. It's one of our absolutely most common of all of our woodland wildflowers, Canada Mayflower. We have another group of leaves that are just emerging. This is not an ephemeral spring wildflower. It's not a spring season wildflower. This will be blooming actually about midsummer and gets quite tall when it puts up its flower stalk. It can be several feet tall. This is one of our wild lettuces. If you look closely at this leaf here, you'll see that it's got almost like 5 different lobes to that leaflet. And that's a telltale sign that this is tall rattlesnake root. And when it does put up a flower spike, it will grow probably 6-7 feet tall, have small flowers hanging down that'll be whitish. This is tall rattlesnake root. Another of our very common woodland plants. You can see it almost looks like it's vine-like. So I lift up on the plant here, it kind of goes back underneath these leaves. You see the stem running along the ground. This is a twining type of plant. It's not really a vine, but very distinctive leaves, very deep venation. They're very vibrant green to them. In about end of June, it'll have a small 4-petal white flower with very, very hairy petals. Very distinctive thing. And then later on, the blooms will actually fuse and form a kind of a double-lobed fruit, which is crimson red. And that really gives rise to its name of partridge berry. Again, very common woodland wildflower, partridge berry. Now we've come across another plant that's just emerging. I'm going to kind of zoom in a little bit closer. You can see this one stem here is quite very hairy. And yet, if you look at another stem coming off of the same plant, it's virtually hairless. The leaves look, of course, the same. And without taking a closer look at this plant, I see that it can have some hairiness to it. I would have suspected that this is anise root. And because the entire plant doesn't have hairy stems, I'm quite convinced that it's anise root rather than sweet cicely. They're both in the same genus. Both have identical flowers, which will be coming up late June. Very tiny white flower. And it puts on a really interesting little seed pod, which is a fun little trailside nibble. Tastes just like anise. This is anise root. Now, as I've come along, I've realized that there's a little shrub that's just growing. It's only about 4 or 5 inches tall, but I wanted to show you how you can determine one of our native cherries. If you recognize the leaf, and probably a better specimen would be an older one, of course. But what's so distinctive about this species, when you know it's a cherry, is hopefully it'll focus in. Notice along the leaf margin, very, very fine teeth. Almost look like little hairs coming off. Don't know if that's helping at all. But those fine teeth is really what helps distinguish this. This is choke cherry. I think it's really one of our finest flavored wild cherries. But the common name of choke cherry is very apt. If you eat the wild fruit, it's going to be giving you a sense of almost choking because they are so bitter. But with cooking, they make an excellent filling sauce for pie, that is, or sauce for ice cream. Also just a wonderful jam or syrup. Has a very distinctive flavor. That's choke cherry. We're up atop the cliff along the bluff along the Mohawk River, and we're actually looking upstream. And right in front of us here is a nice little cluster of blooms from common shadbush. It's one I'd showed in my earlier hikes. Just wanted to give you a perspective of just how many wonderful blooms one of these shrubs puts on at this time. And again, leaves are just barely starting to show. So this is common shadbush. And we're going to get our last look at the round-lobed hepatica. These are certainly winding down. They come in different colors. You can see kind of the light bluish purple to white. Just a beautiful early spring flower. These are all round-lobed hepatica. Just missed. There we go. That's the osprey hunting on the Mohawk River. Just heard it calling a moment ago. And as you can see, our pair of Canada geese. If we get close enough, hopefully we'll be able to see the goslings. I believe there's 3. They're going to be probably scooting off into the pond here momentarily. Mom and Dad want to take care of the young'uns. You can hear that call. That was the osprey. And we got Mom and Dad walking into the pond with the goslings. Maybe we'll get a closer look at them in a moment. There we go. There's, looks like 5 goslings with them. Here on the pond. This will be probably our last look at colt's foot for the season. This is the dandelion looking like flower, but you can see again the stems are scaled. They're very fuzzy. Dandelion stems are very smooth. The leaves here are another of our kind of late season, or late summer, or late spring, excuse me, late spring season wildflowers. That's wild geranium. And then we're going to close out today's visit by taking a look at, unfortunately, one of our most invasive plants. And this is garlic mustard. As you can see, the flowers are just starting to bud. Very distinctive leaf, very deep lobes on the leaf. This is the second-year plant, and actually here we have one that's in bloom. Just starting to bloom, a little 4-part white flower. Too bad we don't have scratch and sniff technology in these videos. If you were to crush the leaf, it would actually have a very strong garlic odor to it. It's one of the easiest ways to distinguish this plant. But garlic mustard, again, unfortunately, is one of our most invasive plants. And studies in Ohio and forests have actually shown that because they put off a chemical, they have a allelopathic effect, it's actually thwarting the growth of hardwood seedlings such that they're not coming back in the forest when you have a large infestation of this plant. This is garlic mustard.